Nicholas Andrews,
Here.
Justin Henderson,
Here.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We have a couple of minutes. We can just do an A or nay response. We don't have to do a roll call, but I'm going to take them separately. So, Planning Commission meeting minutes for February 13th, 2023. Do you have any changes, any discussion, or do you have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second?
Second.
All in favor, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. It's approved. We have minutes from March 27th, 2023. Do you have any discussion? Any proposed changes? Do you have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any nays? They're both unanimous approved. Do we have any correspondence?
Yes, through the chair, you have on your dais an email and letter from the applicant. I don't know if it was emailed to everybody. We want to make sure everyone had a copy of it.
So with that, let's discuss whether we had any ex parte communication to disclose. Actually, since I was one of the people who received that email, that would be what I would be disclosing, but I think we're all aware of any other ex parte to disclose. Well, okay, thank you very much. Do we have any old business?
We do not.
With that, if we could take up new business PC 0723.
This is PC 0723. It's a conditional use application. The owner is Walker Capital Holdings LLC. Their agent is Steve Devenau. The property is located at 201 Fifth Avenue North. The request is a conditional use for a drinking establishment and outdoor bar for an existing structure located in the Central Business District, the CBD zoning district. Pursuant to section 34-345D2 and 34-345D7 of the Jacksonville Beach Land Development Code. The subject property is located at the southwest corner of Fifth Avenue North and 2nd Street North. The previous use of the property was a standalone drinking establishment with an outdoor bar area, previously known as Beau's Coral Reef, that operated from 1964 to January of 2019, when the doors were closed. The property existed as a non-conforming use, having predated the Land Development Code, and did not have conditional use approval for an enclosed bar or outdoor bar area. The current owner who purchased the property in March of 2020 desires to reestablish the commercial property with a new bar, retail, and office uses. The owner had previously requested to rezone the property from Central Business District to Redevelopment District to accomplish this goal. The application was denied by City Council in 2022. Currently, the commercial building sits vacant, although some permitted work has been accomplished. Currently, the current owner applied for building permits to rehab the commercial property in 2020. However, the permits expired due to unforeseen circumstances, and consequently the work was unable to be fully completed. Pursuant to section 34-622-6 of the Land Development Code, a non-conforming use that is discontinued or abandoned for a period of more than 6 months, more than 6 consecutive months, whether or not the equipment or furniture is removed, may not be reestablished or resumed, and any subsequent use shall conform to the provisions of the Land Development Code. The Planning Department deemed this property to be abandoned or discontinued, thus causing it to lose its grandfathering status in use, parking, or other applicable standards. The new owner wants to reestablish the drinking establishment, as was operational on the site for over 55 years, and add a retail and office component to the site. The plan contemplates using the existing building, which was constructed in 1954, and maintaining the same outdoor bar area and parking adjacent to 2nd Street North. The applicant is choosing to apply for conditional use approval for the bar use, and has a companion variance application submitted to address some of the site's existing nonconformities. The project also includes a small retail location and office space. The applicant is proposing approximately 6,700 square feet of drinking establishment, including the outdoor area, 250 square feet of retail, and 200 square feet of office. Included in the provision for RD rezoning request, the applicant requested an exemption from the 500-foot alcohol exclusion per section 34-393-2, as they were 450 feet from Mangoes, as measured from main entrance to main entrance. The conditional use application includes more detailed routes to various existing drinking establishments that would be considered in the compliance with the code for the sake of distance requirement, and appears to demonstrate that they are in fact 500 feet or more away from with the relocation of the main entrance, therefore no longer needing relief from the 500-foot proximity requirement. Staff agrees with the applicant's assessment that the redevelopment of this property will serve to eliminate blight conditions on prominent downtown property and is consistent with the downtown redevelopment plan. The reestablishment of the drinking establishment and the additional other commercial uses are not out of character with the existing mix of uses in the downtown area on adjacent properties, and provides for the reactivation of the property that has sat vacant for over 3.5 years. Staff finds the proposed project is not inconsistent with the adopted comprehensive plan and agrees with the applicant's assessment of its consistency provided in the application materials. Staff does have concerns with the proposed site plan, particularly the size of the office and retail uses and the proposed amount of parking. Staff would recommend the following considerations for Planning Commission to consider. A minimum aggregate of square footage for the office and retail component of mixed-use project of no less than 1,000 square feet. One paved ADA accessible parking space will be provided on site in compliance with the Land Development Code, and the rear deck be removed to provide more on-site parking. With these proposed changes and based on the provided application and analysis in the report, the Planning and Development Department recommends approval of PC 0723.
Thank you, Mr. Clerkley. I'm going to ask my fellow commissioners to please hold your questions for Mr. Hopefully, because I neglected to kind of lay out how we run these meetings for everyone. So the Planning Commission bases its decisions on competent, substantial evidence, including testimony provided in this meeting. Any person who is not an applicant or agent that wishes to speak will need to fill out a speaker's card located on the side table by the door and turn it into the clerk. And obviously, many of you knew that, but I just want to make sure that everyone knew that. It is our practice that, regardless of the type of issue we are asked to decide upon, each member of the public is given 3 minutes to speak on each item. Please refrain from speaking out from the audience, applauding, groaning, etc., as we try to ensure an atmosphere where everyone listening or in attendance is comfortable, and please silence your cell phones. So my apologies for not saying that first thing. Having said that, do we have any questions for Mr. Pope? I actually had one, if that's okay. I usually don't ask too many questions, but Mr. Copley, the suggested conditions that the planning department recommends, could you help us relate them back to the conditional use, the findings we need to make for a conditional use permit?
Sure. Are you referring to the criteria in the code?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So yeah, under section 34, 231, there are the applicable standards for conditional uses. The first condition, or consideration rather, is whether or not it meets the policy of the comprehensive plan, which we felt it did. The question of whether it's consistent with the character of the immediate vicinity, this area is a mix of multiple different commercial uses, including bars and restaurants and retail establishments. The design of the proposed conditional use minimizes the adverse effects, including visual impact of the proposed uses, adjacent uses. One of the things we thought that the removal of the deck would allow for both more parking, which would have a lesser impact on the surrounding property, as well as provide an opportunity perhaps for some more screening to adjacent uses, although it is predominantly commercial in this area. The second, category 6 deals with adequate public facilities to serve the property. Now we do obviously recognize the building's been there for 60 years. They do have adequate water and sewer capacity and stormwater to address that. But again, parking is one of those things that in the downtown area, you can't get a variance for parking. You can only buy your way out of parking through a ratio that we have in the city. So in essence, they're going to either provide money to go into a fund to build a parking garage in the future, or they're going to provide the parking. So whether or not that makes some economic sense for them or not, I don't know, but we felt that, they had the opportunity to provide more parking, so we encouraged them to do so through that condition. The question about the commercial and office uses, I think it's just a practical one in that a 500 square foot office or a 500 square foot retail space really is kind of the minimum to provide the necessary ADA accessible bathroom, room for an employee, room for merchandise, those kind of things. So that was really just kind of a standard that we would apply anywhere for the practical application of any type of commercial use. And other than that, we really felt they met the rest of the conditions as well as the, what do you call it, the requirements of the redevelopment district. They find that in the CRA plan, vacant properties are considered a blighting influence, and the plan encourages the reuse of existing properties or the redevelopment of existing properties downtown. So we felt that it met that as well.
Thank you, Mr. Copeland.
Can you just remind me what the minimum requirement is for a retail and for an office? I know you recommended 1,000 square feet.
There's no minimum in our code. It would really come down to the building official's determination on literally what the minimum space would be needed to meet the building and fire code requirements. In conversations with both the building official and the fire marshal, there was some concerns that meeting ADA access and bathrooms and things like that would be challenging in a smaller space, but it's hard to say if it would be possible or not until they actually design that area.
Gotcha. And then remind me, just because it's been a while since I've looked, but if you do add a retail location or area in an office, it also it reduces the amount of parking spaces that you need. Can you remind me about?
Correct, yeah, so for what we call shopping center use, which is 3 or more different uses, the parking standard is 1 space for 250 square feet. For a drinking establishment, fresh my memory real quick. Sorry, I should have that handy.
I'm asking because that's obviously why they want this too, and I think it's important for all of us to realize that.
It's 1 space per 100 square feet, so it's a little bit more than half, or a little less than half the number of spaces they would need if it were just a bar.
Any other questions from the planning board? Okay. Hearing none, would the applicant please come forward to be sworn in and give any presentation that you care to share with us? Thank you.
Please raise your right hand, state your name and address.
Scott McAllister, 1941 Beach Avenue, Atlantic Beach, Florida.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
I do. It's good to see you all again. A couple people, Justin, I didn't have your email address to send that letter. Did you guys need a copy of? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, everyone knows.
Okay. And I know most of you know what happened in the last hearing, so I'll kind of briefly go through it again. So we had gone through the last zoning exception for 12 months after everything occurred. And then after we went from city council and there was concerns on the 500 feet distance. After that, I went back out to the property to try to figure out, what to do at that point, and got a survey measuring wheel and measured out, and come to find out, I thought, wow, I think it actually does meet the requirement. And then we called the survey company, and they came out and confirmed that it did actually meet that requirement. So then it started the process for us again for this application after the last one. And to kind of remind you guys or go over part of the history, I purchased the building in 2019, and the goal was to go in and do some cosmetic renovations, nothing substantial. So we went in and pulled a permit and started the process through everything. Through that time, Public Works stopped by and said that they wanted a dumpster corral, which took us about 7 months to go through the plans and build the dumpster corral in the left corner or the right corner of the property. And that would sort of put us at a completion date of the same month that the pandemic hit in March 2020. and we didn't get the doors open because everything closed. At that point, we had to close our other locations and lay off our staff and kind of go through the COVID pandemic problems. About 3 months into that, that's when I found myself at St. Vincent's, and my body had been shutting down. Through 18 months of Mayo and St. Vincent's, they found out that it was a bacterial infection that was going sepsis and causing liver failure and vision issues. And so kind of navigated through that. That was one of the reasons why normally I'm a little more on top of measurements and making sure things are correct like that. And at that time, I was kind of went off with what everyone felt what the truth was, and it just was slightly incorrect. And I was very happy to find out that we met the 500-foot requirement. So kind of after that time, I finally went through the antibiotic treatment and started to get my mind about me, and called my plumber. I said, go ahead, wrap up your permit, call your inspection, and find out that his permit had expired. Through the COVID moratorium, our Duval permits had been automatically extended, and this permit wasn't extended. So I called down and got concerned, and we were 3 or 4 days late, or maybe it was 7 days late for the COVID moratorium permit extension deadline when I turned the letter into Jacksonville Beach. At that point, I immediately went down and met with Heather and said, what do we do now? And she said, Scott, you have to start all over again, and you lose your parking and your zoning. We're 80% built out inside. And I said, well, we have to keep fighting. We have to go through the process and do what we need to do to make it right. And that's when we started the rezoning, when I came in front of you guys last time. And so now I'm back. Did you guys have any questions on that?
Questions for the applicant?
Okay.
I have a question here. On this last page, on the drawing that you have here, the comparison, the existing conditions and the proposed plan, what are the differences?
From where it is, I think that
A and D or 1 and 2?
I think the proposed was where they wanted the 2 office and retail sections in there, so we had added those. I can't see the picture, so I'm not exactly sure what.
Can we get that page on the
Do you want,
overhead?
here, do you want my
That'd be
copy?
great.
It's the final page
Oh,
on
sure.
the packet.
Yeah, that's it.
It's the parking,
Okay.
the on-street parking, it's on Second Street, is the big difference.
Existing doesn't have the rental and the
I see.
office.
So the parking was, and the landscaping was the main change. I know one side where the dumpster corral is in that right corner. I know when there was discussion about adding parking in the rear of the building, my concern is that the dumpster corral is not quite represented correctly in the schematic drawing, and it encroaches over more. So if we were to make a right-of-way for the parking in the rear, we would need to remove the dumpster corral. And then if we made a right-of-way in the back, we would lose spaces from the front parking to get to the back. So kind of, the dumpster corral was what sort of created this whole problem when we pulled that cosmetic permit. And it shows that there's a decent amount of space, but it's on site, it's not wide enough to be able to pull the cars in and have them back out, to go straight out, back on Second. So it would need to be removed. And there there wasn't when we went through Public Works. I met them out there and went through the whole process of the location and how they wanted it to be set up. They said that this was how it needed to be done for the trucks to pull in. We actually, when we dug the footers, we had to redig them twice and shift it just a foot over so that the truck could get in effectively, according to the Public Works plan. So to try to move that dumpster around anywhere else, there really would be another effective place. It's pretty expensive to build too.
So I have a question. Is it possible to point out where your proposed retail and office spaces would be in this layout? I can take that. So this would be the proposed office space here, and that's the proposed retail space there.
Okay, copy, that's what I thought.
It shows it's small, but on the floor plan, it actually is quite a bit larger than what those are, probably 3 times, maybe 2.5 times the size of what the 500 square foot takes, or what it would use up. My concern through the whole process of the length of time that it's taken, I have had to take out a few loans to keep the payments going and everything moving forward. My concern is if we lose our only outside seating, you know, on the beach, people like to eat and drink outside, and it's a important revenue stream to be able to make up enough. It's going to take a while to pay back the loans that we pulled out to try to get try to get it open.
So with the 3 proposed amendments or changes here, the one was the making the office and the retail bigger, the added ADA parking space and a rear deck be removed for more inside parking. Where do you guys stand on like making those changes? Is that something that can be done or not done, or I'm not sure.
Sure. So on the retail and the office side, that we can do that. We can get that set up on the inside and worked out okay. The biggest concern is the deck in the back and taking the dumpster corral down, and just not just the overall expense of doing it, but at the same time losing the ability to have outside service for when the weather's good, and you know, kind of kill our people coming and ordering and just kind of having another side. You know, 'cause when people think of a place to go, a lot of times they dismiss it if it doesn't have a outside area where they can step out and get some air. On the office and retail, you know, on the parking side, you know, it'd be nice to be able to turn back the clock, but you know, in life you can't go backwards, just keep going forwards. So with the office and retail and the parking, you know, if it's what we need to do, you know, it's what we need to do.
So can I clarify, when you refer to parking, you're referring to the proposed condition about the paved ADA parking space?
In my mind, I was thinking more along the lines of purchasing other spots that are missing. That's where the big expense is going to be. So the site only accomplishes about half the parking that the site would need for the use. So then there's another 8 or 9 spots that we would end up having to buy from the city, which would be very expensive. I think they're going to, you know, something.
Okay, the department is suggesting that there be a condition specific to a single ADA parking spot.
We would absolutely do that.
It's on the plan already too, right? What's the, in the bottom right corner?
Yeah, I think there's just one.
Yeah, that's what, it's already on the plan too. So why, I guess, was it a recommendation that's on the plan already?
I think the rest of the parking is gravel. We just wanted to ensure that that one met the ADA requirements and was actually paved.
It says concrete.
So in your plan, have you taken any places off since the last time you were here, more parking in that area, or is it just all seating? The
On the back area,
porch?
on the deck side. Well, unless we couldn't get the cars back behind there, if we'd have to remove the whole deck and the dumpster corral to be able to get the cars to actually go in there, and then the right of way to access the back portion, we would end up losing a space or two. So it would be all that work and the dumpster corral for maybe 2 more spaces, something along those lines, if we're lucky. And then at that point, I'm not sure where we would relocate the dumpster corral, that the truck could get in at an angle, the way that Public Works wanted us to. Because I guess the way it's set up, you have the oncoming traffic, and they have to go in just on their side of the street, pick the dumpster, and then go straight. Maybe you could push it all the way in the back. I'm not sure, you have to sit down, but it'd be very high expense, and I don't think it would accomplish more than maybe 2 more parking spots. Then we would end up losing the deck altogether.
What did you change since the last time you've been here? Otherwise than the measurement of the 500 feet?
Nothing. The big one was the 500 feet.
So this is all the same that you had last time you were here, everything except the 500 feet?
It is. And I think from what I understood, the big concern on setting a precedent for 500 feet was that every other project that would go in front of the council, it would sort of say, oh, well, they let Scott not have to do the 500 feet, so we should have that same accommodation. And I think it could, from what I understand, that's a very hot point for different developers down in the area, so I think that it could create more people wanting it, and that was kind of what I understood from the concern of actually going ahead and approving something less than 500 feet. Did I explain that right? I feel like that kind of... Okay.
Do you have other questions for the applicant? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is
I was now open the public hearing. We have some speaker cards.
going to do this very well. Steve, you're up.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm Steve Deven,
Please.
1 Independent
Deven.
Drive.
Please
I'm
raise your
sorry.
right hand, state your name and address.
Steve Deven, 1 Independent Drive, Suite 1200, Jacksonville, 32202.
You swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do. Just to expand a little bit on what Scott mentioned, the concerns at City Council really revolved around the 500 feet in large part. And so what we did is we went out the following week to try and measure a distance where we could put a door maybe on the back of the building or further down one of the streets to get that entrance 500 feet away from Mango's, in hopes of being able to avoid that issue. And what we found out, as Scott mentioned, was that the doors already are 500 feet away from Mango's, the way that they're measured in our code. And so we verified that with Heather, and because we had already sought the rezoning, rather than waiting the year to file another rezoning, we reapplied for another way, which is a conditional use permit, and then some variances. So this application is the conditional use permit, and Commissioner White, as you observed, it is virtually the same as the one before. On the site plan, those little boxes are about 450 square feet on the site plan. The board last time said that they should be 1,000 square feet. We have not changed the site plan, but we would be agreeable to the 1,000 square feet that was approved before. That's why the boxes look a little bit smaller, but they would get bigger. We would revise them obviously when we go in for permitting. The rest of the situation on the parking, Scott did a great job describing the changes. We've shown striped and gravel parking spaces, we've showed additional landscaping, and the challenges with the dumpster, I couldn't have described it better myself. The dumpster kind of is where it is. If you push it in the back, then there's no way to really fit in parking and be able to have trash service in the back. So having that dumpster up front is really the ideal location from an efficiency standpoint. And if we create a drive aisle and then parking going back to the deck, the net change is probably maybe a two parking space benefit. And what your code allows Scott to do instead is to buy his way out of that requirement. And so I think what he's saying another way is that it would be preferable from a site planning perspective to go ahead and buy his way out of the parking rather than to go through all the work to create a net increase of 2 parking spaces in the back. The deck in the back you guys discussed last time, and because it's on the other side of the building, opposite from the residences that are to the south, it's fully screened and blocked. And so the outside service, if you will, that we're asking for really is consistent with the commercial side of the neighborhood that is further to the north. The only other thing that I'll mention is that there was a condition in your last approval regarding parking that's saying that parking will have to be provided prior to a certificate of use or a certificate of occupancy being issued for any of the uses, and we would be fine with that as well. That gave you all, I think, in the context of your last conversation, assurance that parking would be dealt with before we open. And so we'd be comfortable with that condition being pulled forward into this approval as well, if that's your desire.
I don't remember feeling good about that, Steve.
You what?
I don't really feel good. I didn't remember feeling good about that. I don't have my notes from that time, but.
Well, there was, the parking was pulled forward. Again, if there's not a condition about parking before we open, I mean, we're still gonna have to do it anyway, but anyway, that's the quick overview, and without going into all the details, we agree with staff that we meet all the criteria, and we appreciate you guys taking this up again tonight. If we pass here tonight, we'll go in front of the Board of Adjustment next week to talk about the variances that we've requested, which are primarily design related, because the building is so old and was built before our land development code. Thank you.
The speakers? Tony Morgan.
Good evening. Good to see you all again.
Please raise your right hand, state your name and address.
Anthony Morgan, 13045 South Bend Road, Jacksonville, Florida, 32226.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is in this matter the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do. Thank you. Thanks for this opportunity. I just wrote out the brief points that I knew of this case. Some of this is a little repetitive, but it took 2 minutes to read through slowly, so I'll try to read through it fast. But when Scott bought this property and liquor license, it was a functioning bar that was in disrepair and poorly managed. He wanted to improve the location and atmosphere of the place. He submitted plans to the city to do this, and these were approved. He remodeled the location to the spec the city had approved. The city came out for final inspection, and they moved the goalpost, saying he needed an enclosed trash area. This added $40,000 to the site cost, caused him to lose 2 parking spaces, and pushed the completion date into 2020. At the time this phase was wrapping up, the federal government deemed Scott's occupation and all of his employees non-essential. Scott had to lay off over 100 people. This shutdown took a significant toll on many people psychologically and physically. At this point, Scott's health failed, and he was in and out of Mayo Clinic and at death's door for many months. I personally visited him and witnessed this struggle. When he came to, he was 3 days past the deadline for a final inspection. To reiterate, this inspection would have been completed 1 year earlier if the city had inspected the original plans they had approved, and or it would have been completed if the government had not told him to go home and stop working. Due to these added burdens, Scott missed his second final inspection deadline by 3 days. The city took the zoning away that the building had held for 50 years. He has had to pay out many thousands of dollars to float the interest on this unproductive business, and it's been an eyesore to the local area. A wise man once brought our attention to there being a difference between the letter and the spirit of the law. I'm appealing to this body to work within the spirit of the law and allow Scott to complete what he has started. And personally, I've been in many of his establishments, and they're great. And we did come before the board, I think 6 months ago, and it did make it past this board, so I appreciate that happening at that time. And thanks for your time. That's it.
Ken Marsh.
again, state your name and address.
Jim Marsh, 2011 Gale Avenue.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do. I am in opposition to this application. If you look at my handout, start on pages 1 and 2, shown by the numbers on the top. This was drafted by staff. Highlighted in pink are all the areas referenced as bar. 6 times it is referenced a bar. Never is it referenced a restaurant, or even a bar/restaurant. So let's move on to pages 3 through 6 of the handout. Answers for standard applicable to use. We start to see the conditional use become blurred. Now highlighted in yellow, bar/restaurant, 8 times. Bar restaurant or bar? What is it? More Shim Sham or more Larry's Giant Sub? This is a misrepresentation at its highest order. Regardless, the intent is distorted and unclear. So on that issue alone, this application should be dismissed. However, should you elect to move forward, then you must ask yourself to what degree is this a bar versus a restaurant? Because whether it is more bar, more restaurant, this will add clarity and substance to the standards and criteria applied. You can be a horse or a cow, but you can't be both. If this truly is a restaurant, then let's get the facts and documentation that support it. My Exhibit B contains some menus. I'll hand them out at the end of my 3 minutes. You can see by the menus that these are businesses or more restaurants. You talk about Larry Giant Sub. You talk about Keizu Sushi Burrito. I got the menus. So we're not real sure about the compatibility here. Is this applicant going to serve the same percentage of food that these businesses do? But even if it's a restaurant, pages 1 and 2 of the staff report says it's a bar. So bars or restaurants are not cut from the same cloth. And if the staff got it wrong, then what else is wrong with this analysis? Along with the bar came the purchase of the legacy license that does not require them to serve food. So my guess is the applicant or lawyer will tell you it will have some food, but some food just sounds like our Rhinos, restaurants in name only. And we know the problem they bring. Adding a bar has an adverse effect on our downtown district. It's absurd and true. It is adding a bar and saying it doesn't have an adverse effect is just untrue. And if you don't believe me, ask Chief Smith. How much do you want to put on the backs of our police force down there before you break them? So to close, is a bar consistent with the goals of the comp plan? Absolutely not. Look at page 4 of my handout. LU1 of the comp plan talks about quality of life in Jack's Beach. In what universe does adding a bar add to the quality of life to the citizens? LU1. How about the quality of life for our police? The last thing they need is another bar to oversee. In fact, I talked to Chief Smith today. The applicant and their staff even contacted him to talk about the quality of life to our force. Let's look at page 5, item 2. Is the added bar going to be consistent with harmonious development of the district? Of course not. Page 6, item 4. Added bar going to have an adverse effect on the zoning district? Absolutely. Look again, Exhibit A. This is it used to be a gay bar. Okay, never talk about a restaurant. So comparing its past use is just a distortion of reality and lacks relevancy. Here's the menus. Is this going to be a bar restaurant? Like Larry's Giant Sub? This is Bo's. Headlines, just a gay bar. A bit says she was a gay bar owner, okay? Not a restaurant.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone in the audience who has not filled out a speaker's card who would like to address us? If so, I would do this.
No, I get to rebut, Kim. I get to speak. For the applicant. I get to speak, right, in rebuttal to the comments? As the applicant?
Are you the applicant?
I am, yeah. I filed the application, my name's on the application.
I guess we were just a little confused that you filled out a speaker's card.
Well, I filled out a speaker's card, I don't know, because my client wanted to go first and wanted to speak in the first section. Does it
Okay, so
matter?
is
It
it,
is a little bit confusing because you didn't use the speaker card, but this has happened in the past. I just suggest in the future that if you're gonna be the representative, even if your client speaks, that you sit with the client and then
Okay,
act as the attorney.
okay, I don't know how else to do that, we're sitting right next to each other talking about it.
but it's appropriate to still have
Yeah,
questions
he's
for the
representing that
applicant.
he's actually here in the capacity as his representative that he
Okay.
can do the
So yes, if you have questions for.
I would love to hear it.
Yeah, well, thank you, Madam Chair. We've been very transparent. This is a bar. It's going to be serving food. There is going to be a food component. And so I guess what we were trying to illustrate in the, and I think what the staff was trying to illustrate is there is going to be a food component of the facility. So it's not going to reach the level of 51% that's required for an SRX license. Mr. McAllister has a 4 COP license, or also known as a quota license. They're limited in Jacksonville Beach to I think only 10 or 12 in the entire city. And so this location, if it doesn't go here, this liquor license will travel somewhere that meets the requirement. And so we've been clear about it. It's a bar. We're not trying to hide as a restaurant pretending to be, or a bar pretending to be a restaurant. We're just making the point that we are going to be serving food. And so all of the points that Mr. Marsh made are interesting, but we've been transparent about what we are. It's the same thing that this body considered before. It's virtually the same as what was approved before. And again, we just appreciate the consideration and we'll answer any other questions you may have.
Further questions for the applicant?
Is it gonna be a good gay bar?
And I don't think it really matters.
I'm only kidding.
I know.
I just think the music was great. I used to go there and dance.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I know, I'm not sure. I don't know how to answer that.
Also don't think it matters.
No, it doesn't.
Okay, so no final questions for the applicant. So I'm going to close the public hearing and bring the item back to the board for discussion. We've heard the department's position on conditions and the applicant's, and now, do we have a motion? And once we do, let's, please, talk about what each of us is thinking about.
So I'll make a motion to approve for the purpose of discussion,
Approve with no conditions or?
with no conditions for the purpose of discussion.
So what do my fellow commissioners think about?
Yeah, so where I'm at right now is,
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry. Do we have a second?
I just want to talk about it. But, yeah,
Okay, so we do have a second.
no, I can't second that. Because, for discussion, yeah, I'll second the discussion, but I don't want to.
Yeah, you just say it's-
Second for discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so let's discuss. Thank you, Sanjay.
Yeah, I guess where I'm at right now is, you can't take away his the outdoor seating on a restaurant / bar. Otherwise, I mean, they're willing to pay down the parking spots, right? And, what are you thinking, Justin?
I think if parking is somewhat what it was before, if noise and everything else is fine, the bar's a bar. It was a bar before, it's a bar again. It would be a bar after that. Let it be a bar, move on.
My only issue is the 250 and 200. I know they're using it to reduce the amount of parking spaces that they need. What are your thoughts on that?
So, all right, I agree with Justin. I think that the parking is gonna have to be solved regardless, right? He has to either buy I do concur that they need to expand to 1,000 feet minimum aggregate for the retail and office space, because I think that the proposed, on this drawing right here, they just look really small, and I'm not really sure what use anybody would get out of those. I think 1,000 square feet is the minimum for both of those, and aggregate is something we should ask. And then when it comes to concerns about it being a bar or a restaurant or anything like that, the fact of the matter is it was a bar for 50 years. And I don't believe it to be inconsistent with what has been there, and until the pandemic hit, frankly, would have been there continuing. All the reasons aside, I guess my point is that I think it's consistent with its use historically.
Madam Chair, I would ask the question, if we're concerned about 1,000 feet and retail sales and the food, to make it not be a bar, but we've heard it's been a bar, it's been a bar, it's been a bar.
They want it to be a bar too.
Yeah, so why do we care about the internal, the internal space for food and office?
So
If
in
we
my,
don't care if it's a bar.
in my mind, that's a little bit more about making it a true, okay, I'm separating the two discussions here, right? Whether it's a bar or a restaurant, the majority of it will be a bar, okay?
So
But
why
to
don't
call
we
it
force that- Why don't
multi-use-
we force that on the applicant to make him put in a faux kitchen and a faux?
I'm not asking for a faux kitchen or anything like that. I'm talking about the retail space and the
Yeah,
office
retail
space.
yeah. What's
In
the-
my mind, to make it truly multi-use, there has to be more than 200 square feet dedicated to office space, right? So they're two separate issues in my mind. Okay, I understand that it can be a bar, that's the majority of the use, but there also has to be a reasonable amount of space for the other uses to get to the 250 square foot per parking space versus 100 square feet per parking space.
So would it be, with the parking, if they left the office and retail, clearly those are there right now, it's gonna be, they need some retail place to sell some t-shirts on the wall, and they need an office place so a manager can sit and count money at the end of the day. And they need a shoebox to do it. They're trying to put that in there also because it saves them a couple parking spaces at the end of the day. If they,
No, that is the reason.
well, yeah, it did, right, but if they do away with that, would they not just have to buy more parking?
It'd be
Would that be a stipulation, just buy more parking and,
because it would be a lot more expensive,
right?
a lot more.
When you guys talk about buying parking, is there already a set plan on how many parking places they have to buy and where? When are they supposed to buy these parking places?
Through the chair, but I'll give a quick explanation. So, in the downtown central business district, there is a fund that the city collects money for the purposes of building improved parking in the future. In this case, probably parking garages on some of the surface lots that we own, which would then provide more parking. Applicants have the option, if approved by the planning director, to pay per parking space fee in lieu of providing the parking that they're required to have. So in the downtown, typically, the number of parking spaces that you're required to have is less than the rest of the city. But even then, because the lots are so small, a lot of times people still need to buy their way out of that parking requirement. So for this, they're requesting the mixed use element because that gives them, as a shopping center under our code, a different standard. And I think I misspoke earlier, but in the central business district, a shopping center is one per 500. So it's a significantly less amount of parking they have to provide and pay for. And to Justin's point, these have to be separate spaces. They're not for use by the restaurant, they're other businesses in essence, so they create more activity on the street.
So, sorry, Madam Chair. So my point is exactly that. For me to be comfortable calling it a mixed-use space, I think there needs to be a minimum of 1,000 feet for the other two uses. That is a separate issue in my mind from whether it's a bar or a restaurant for the majority of the space.
Through the chair, one other point on that. A restaurant's allowed by right, so they wouldn't be here before you guys if they were doing a restaurant. To do a bar, they have to get conditional use. So in essence, by asking for this, they're saying they want a bar.
Did I hear you correctly? I'm sorry to interrupt. Did I hear you correctly, though, that they're looked at as different entities, so they wouldn't be able to use those parking spaces at, I guess, the times that those businesses are open?
No, I mean, the shopping center considers the aggregate of all the uses for the parking requirement. So for the total building square footage, they have to provide one space per 500 regardless of how that
Gotcha.
is allocated.
Okay.
Can I just introduce the idea of there is a condition proposed about the ADA parking space? Talk about that.
I don't think that, it says concrete, I just want to,
Yeah, I think they would have to meet it, so I don't know if that's relevant.
yeah.
I think it was carried over from the
Yeah.
reason.
Madam Chair, because you're offering conditions and we would have to agree to them, I just want you to know that we would agree to the 1,000 square feet that was proposed from last time. And so I just want you to know that on the record that we would agree with that 1,000 square feet, if that's the will of the commission to adopt that as a condition. Incidentally, we would probably file for that in our building permit anyway, to ask for that mixed-use component. I don't think that it has to be necessarily blessed by this body, I could be wrong, but regardless, I think what may be trying to be done is to ensure that it's truly a mixed-use project, and that's why the condition will be on there. That 1,000 square feet, although it's not in the code, has always been kind of a rule of thumb that Mr. Popoli and Ms. Ireland's predecessor used, and so it's not unusual. For example, the space next door to Oku, 1,000 square feet was kind of the goal. Same thing on Surf of the Bar way back when, 2 or 3 permutations ago, 1,000 square feet was the hurdle. So we're familiar with it, we would agree with it.
Thanks. Further discussion?
Just one point, there's, when it comes to parking, right, I believe that it's either you buy your way out or you have to supply the parking, so that's kind of, in my mind, a done thing, right? There is quite a bit of parking available around it. There is a public parking lot 2 blocks away. I don't think that it would unnecessarily burden the neighborhood to not have 2 to 5 additional spots right there.
But on the other hand, now following that, if you look at number 5 of our CU, does the proposed CU have an adverse effect on the value of the adjacent property? How does that treat those houses back there or those condos? And
I don't think it does, because it's been a bar for 50 plus years. Not only that, we have this beautifully printed out under LU1, it's provide continued high quality of life in Jacksonville Beach for planning for population growth, public and private development, and redevelopment. Feels like it fits in actually perfectly.
I would also point out that it is currently in the blighted condition, right? It's been vacant for a bit. I mean, I know there's been some work done to it, but it has been vacant for 3 years. And the proposed outdoor seating backs up to the commercial side, and there's a fence, in my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong,
Yes,
there's
that's
a
right.
fence between the outdoor deck and residential area.
That's absolutely true, and we've had residents on the other side of that fence in here complaining. I don't know how long ago it was, but I know that we can sit here and hear citizens talk about it. They're not here tonight.
they were here last time.
Were they last night?
Yes.
I would also say they have to realize where they bought property and where they are, right? They're in a busy area.
That's not relevant to this decision. And you have your planning department telling you that the rear deck should be removed.
The what?
The rear deck.
Is that what you believe?
Could be. We're discussing right now, we're bringing it
Yeah,
out.
no, I'm trying to find out what your thoughts are before we go to a vote.
I think that there's a problem with the deck in the back with noise in a bar. Absolutely. Depends on where you live, whether it's a problem or not.
But is that problem the concern? Because the recommendation was the deck in the back was for parking. Is the concern with the deck in the back not for noise?
It's a good question from our city.
Our intent was to address parking. We weren't commenting one way or the other on the outside seating. It is the central business district, so we assume that there will be more business and activity and noise at night. I understand that there's existing residential there, but the predominance of the uses in the area are commercial.
When you buy a commercial, you also should know what you're getting into. You're not buying a residential
So just to the point of outdoor, I understand that there's a potential noise issue. I would say that, in my mind, it really depends on what the bar, since this is what we're talking about, is how it's run, right? I live 2 blocks away from a bar that I can regularly hear on Friday night, but that's because of the way that bar is run. I've lived next to outdoor drinking establishments before, there were never a problem. So I don't know that this one size fits all for that.
Well, on the other hand, that issue hasn't been brought up until just now anyway. Hasn't been brought up by our speakers on the speaker cards.
True enough, not tonight, not once.
Is there a recommendation on how it's split, or you usually just let the applicant split it as far as square feet for retail and office?
It's usually their design, we're just asking for a minimum in our condition. Yeah, I mean, they could certainly do half the building as retail if they wanted to.
So Madam Clerk, am I correct that what we have pending before us is a motion to approve? Right.
Can I make a new motion? Or does this one need to get voted on first?
How do you-
Once it's been subjected to your discussion, it has to be a formal amendment
Ah.
or some substitution, but it has to get the permission from the body before you proceed.
Can I make a new motion?
You would move to amend the pending motion, which is a motion to approve without conditions. You state what you want to amend the motion now to say.
Ah, I see,
And then
perfect.
your colleagues would agree to either say, yes, you can amend it, or no. If they say yes, then you put exactly the question that you
Perfect.
want before the body.
Thank you. Motion to amend the motion for requirement of 1,000 square feet minimum of retail and office
Amendment to what?
they must have at least 1,000 square feet to use the mixed use.
And a second is required for that, so we need a second? A second.
Second.
Do we do roll call?
If you want to debate that, you can debate that, but then it's
Is
just
there
a
further discussion on
roll call,
this?
and then you have to vote.
So,
What's the purpose,
So-
what's the purpose of the amendment?
my understanding, just to be clear on this, is that the motion is to amend approval without any conditions to the one condition being that the minimum aggregate square footage for both the retail and office space will be no less than 1,000 feet.
Correct.
The answer to your question is parking. That was the purpose of that.
Well, that was the planning department's recommendation.
Through the chair, just to offer some insight, we feel that anything smaller than that will have practical limitations on being able to accomplish an actual office or retail use and meet all the building code and fire code requirements. We thought 500 square feet was a reasonable minimum for each use.
Last question for you. Why did you, I know the deck, the wood deck in the back, you made it for parking purposes. Why didn't you think, okay, maybe let them buy it out if they want to?
They have the option to buy it out. We just felt that there's an opportunity to provide more parking for the patrons on site right there versus basically paying into a fund and the city builds a garage sometime in the future. We don't know when it's going to happen, where that garage is necessarily going to be. So immediately this would provide additional parking on site for the patrons.
Makes sense, thank you.
So Callie, should I ask you to restate the motion, and then we'll take a roll call?
Is everybody clear on the motion? That we amended it to the condition of 1,000 square foot for mixed use? Okay. David Bell?
Yes.
Colleen White?
Yes.
Justin Lehrman?
Yes.
Nicholas Andrews?
Yes.
Margaret Murray?
Yes.
Okay, so now you have to actually go through the formality of voting on that motion.
We just amended it.
Yes.
I love it.
We're getting
Colleen White,
Yes.
Justin Lerman,